And now, back to the Michael Blum. Welcome to the Michael Blum Show, where we talk about things you don't want to talk about. We talk about sex. We talk about politics. We talk spirituality and substance abuse. Join us by calling 800-699-0980. Think, speak, and be heard. Here now is Michael Blum. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Michael Blum Show. Sorry for that little fluke of an accident earlier on the show, but what the heck, you know? Hopefully everyone out there is listening to me anyway, so it won't make much of a difference. Anyway, you are listening to the Michael Blum Show, which is the premier show that broadcasts from Boca Raton every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. We usually have guests set up, as we do tonight. The subject is sex. You know, people ask me why do I talk about sex so much, and I don't know why should I not? I mean, you know, it's what is it that's enjoyable? I mean, as I'm getting older, it's pretty much food, sex, and my grandchildren. They're the things that are the most important to me. So kind of things change quite a bit. So why do I talk about sex so much on this show? It's because, well, I like it, and it's an interesting stuff to talk about usually. Now, I want you to notice here, I'm growing this is my attempt at a Fu Manchu. How do you do? Because it's Brovember. I don't know if you know about this, but generally, guys, sorry to tell you this, but it is the truth that 50% of us will experience some type of prostate problem in our lives, and this is just to remind people that it's a good thing to donate to and to be aware of. Certainly, if you have anyone in your family that's had these issues or problems, it's really something that you ought to do. You ought to take heed of all of this and make sure that you know what's going on in your life, get tested, PSA, that whole 9 yards kind of a thing. So today we are going to be talking about sex yet again. But we're going to talk about a couple of different aspects of it today. We're going to talk about sexual addiction, and I have an expert who's going to be joining us momentarily, Tony Overbay, and he's a licensed marriage counselor. And, you know, if I'm doing this, I'm going to go get him on already here because I see him in the background. I want to make sure everything is cooking and doing well. How you doing this evening?
Hey, I am doing great. Michael, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. We're a little bit kind of stifled on the video. Looks a little bit choppy, but we'll see what goes on with it. It could be either your upload speed or my download speed. I'm not really sure. But anyway, Tony he's a licensed marriage therapist, and he's a certified mindful habit coach, a CMHC.
You're correct.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did. I mean, the more letters that are my name, right, makes me sound very qualified.
Well, I guess so. There's a ton of letters and stuff like that in here. So anyway, he is a popular motivational speaker as well. He speaks at corporate training sessions, events, different schools, churches, formal and informal settings. He mixes some humor, clinical experience, his Christian faith, and a wealth of personal stories galore. So we want to welcome you to the show, sir.
Hey, thank you. I mean, it's an honor to be. We were thinking about this last week, but then the whole election thing happened, right? So
yeah.
I think that was why to bump us back.
And now you got your voice back, so that sounds like it'll be even better.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you.
So again, I want to thank you for joining us today. You know, before we talk about really sexual problems and sexual addiction, can you tell me what makes up a happy, healthy sexual relationship with a husband and wife? Maybe important to let people know that.
You know, you jumped right in. I mean, let me get my soapbox out because this is one of the topics I like to talk about. I mean, so a podcast on this, and it's this concept called the levels of intimacy. And so initially, when we meet our partner, we're attracted physically, right? And that's kind of, we think someone's attractive, and we want to get their number. We use our best lines, and let's say everything works out great, and we're married. So we've got this physical attraction, this physical intimacy. But now what we know kind of over time, some nice evidence-based shows that really, and a relationship is best when it is formed with psychological intimacy at its core, which is honesty, loyalty, trust, commitment. And then, but above that is this verbal intimacy. So can you just talk with your partner? Can you just talk about anything? In those days in young love when you would just talk to each other for hours. And so what happens is, so we meet at this physical level, but sometimes we go down and we're trying to talk to our partner, and it doesn't go well. We can connect physically, right? And then up above the verbal intimacy is emotional intimacy. So now let's say that we're trying to pour out our heart to our partner, and they say, they don't like what we're sharing, or they think, I can't believe you just said that, or I didn't know that you really felt. And then it doesn't feel right in the relationship, so we jump back up to the physical intimacy. So we go to this place where anytime we're in the relationship, we jump back up and we try to center ourselves in the physical intimacy. But over time, that is, there's always going to be a withdrawal. There's always going to be that part is never quite on equal ground. And so then you've got different times, each partner that is trying to jump back up to physical and something is not going right in the relationship. So when you say what makes a happy, healthy relationship, in my opinion, and doing this for a long time now, is changing that whole relationship with intimacy. Because then when you build your relationship on this psychological intimacy, honesty, loyalty, trust, commitment, when you feel like that's set, then you can go up to that verbal intimacy. Feel like you can talk to your partner about anything. When that's connected, then you can connect on an emotional. Feel like you could share your hopes and dreams, and your partner's not going to shut them down. Above that is this cognitive and intellectual intimacy, which means that one of you can be a PhD and one of you can basically be a dullard, connected on these levels that, it's okay. And above that is the spiritual intimacy, where one of you can be, completely opposite faith, maybe atheist, agnostic, whatever. But it's like we're so connected. And then the top level is the byproduct of all those is intimacy. And I think that's a level, Michael, that I'm trying to get my clients to, where they're not just always saying, if we had more intimacy, we'd be better at all these areas. I'm trying to say, no, if we're better at all these other areas, we have incredible intimate connection.
It's crazy because I can't think in that many levels, because I guess maybe you can figure out who in the relationship is the dullard, but
Sure.
but I kind of, there's this thing when you meet someone, there's like that big adrenaline rush and you get very excited, and then there's this just for men in particular, this unbelievable lust. And then you go through this thing like where it's like that goo-goo-eyed kind of, you're the best thing in the world, and where were you before, and I'm going to be with you forever, and we're walking down the midway, eating the cotton candy, all of that stuff. And then there needs to be a third component, and that's always the one that gets me, and that's what is the piece in there that once you have all that makes, for lack of a better word, a stick-to-itiveness, or that long-term piece that goes on that makes marriages successful or fall apart. Because the mind is nuts. Oh, I love that woman, she's the most beautiful thing in the world, I can't believe it, and 5 weeks later it's that goddamn bitch. Can you be that wrong in life? And obviously with enough chemical infusion in your brain, either legally or illegally, sure, you can think and do whatever you want.
Yeah, and so, and I have to tell you, and I don't know if you're ready to go to this place yet, but addiction at its core, what I have noticed over the years is, so I felt called into this profession to work with men, to help them become better husbands and fathers. And I always kind of tell the joke, the bit, that then when I got to grad school, lay that out to my class, the women in the class would go, oh, what an admirable trait. And then the professors would kind of laugh, and they're all working professionals. And it was because guys wouldn't come to therapy, So then what that did, when I got out into practice, I started seeing guys, but it's primarily for addiction. It's for pornography addiction, compulsive sexual behavior. So then I start realizing the addiction often is the byproduct of, it's not the core problem. And that core problem is not feeling authentic or not feeling connected in their relationships, not feeling connected as a father, not feeling connected with their career, their health, their faith, you name it. And so when they feel that uncomfortable, not connected in their life, they turn to, whether it's porn, sex, food, drugs, alcohol, rock and roll, whatever it is, But so then I'm trying to then down this path of, okay, I need to help guys have better marriages. So then I do a deep dive on what is the most evidence-based couples therapy modality, and it's this one called emotionally focused therapy, EFT. And the reason I go into all this is because it's like EFT is about having a framework to communicate community partner, your hopes, your dreams, your frustrations, because I do feel like you're right. When we're in that Google-eyed phase, we are put elves out there. We really are. So then if there's ever a time I feel like, I don't know, I got to bring this topic up, we're like, okay, that's not the person she married. She's going to leave me, So then we bury these feelings, we bury these emotions because we don't have a framework to be able to say, hey, here's my train of thought, because we're worried if we're emotional, we're vulnerable, that she's going to be like, that's not the guy I married, and she's going to bolt,
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think that's what you're talking about is then, so you hold that in for a little while, and all of a sudden it just explodes because you've been building this resentment. She doesn't even know that she's done anything wrong, or you don't know you've done anything wrong. You didn't know you were being tested, and all of a sudden it just comes out of nowhere with, I can't believe you do this and this. And so my goal is to try to help couples have this better framework to communicate, because then that leads the guy to feeling like he's more connected, which leads him not to feeling like he's got to turn to the addiction.
It's crazy. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, like, I wish you would open up. This is usually a woman to a man. Let me know what's on your mind. And then the guy starts to do that. And after a minute or two of the woman listening to this, they're like glazed over and yawning. And they really don't want to hear that too much. You know?
Okay, so I like, that, or it's even like, okay, he's like, okay, honestly, I don't like when we go, I don't know, I can't even think of an example off the top of my head. I don't like when we, go to chick flicks or whatever, and so she said, I really want you to open up to me. And then he does, he's vulnerable. I do this dumb thing because when I'm speaking, he's like, okay, here's a little bit of my heart, right? I'm going to trust you with it. And then if she responds with, seriously, like, you don't like those? I mean, with how much those mean to me? So he's not about to go offering his heart out again the next time.
Sure.
So the couples modality I use is you're changing the whole paradigm of the way they communicate. So, and I want you to open up to me. And then he says, I don't like chick flicks. I'm working with her as well, because she's got to respond to that emotional bid and with empathy. It's like, okay, I asked him for his opinion, and then it could be like, tell me more. Tell me why you don't like them, because you always go to them with me, and I feel like we were on the same page. And then if he's like, I don't know, when I was young, my parents told me they were getting a divorce, and while I was watching a chick flick, so it's a trigger to me every time, And so now she's thinking, okay, why didn't you ever tell me this, right?
Sure.
And because he's thinking, well, if I would have told you that, you would have left, So I'm trying to get a different modality of a way to communicate. Period.
That's crazy because, I try to get to that with my wife, where we just tell each other if there's something that's bothering us. I can't believe this, but my wife likes these like Velocal ice pops. And so for years, I would pop the stick through it and wrap the paper around it and bring it in and go, here, and I felt real good. And then finally, after like 2 years, she says, can you give me a napkin with this? This thing is so damn slimy. I can't stand it. I said, why don't you say so? I've been handing it to you like this for like a year and a half. And there's not a real answer, but obviously she's happy that I'm getting it, I guess, for her to begin with. So she don't want to say anything. But it's important.
No, that's a great example. It is, because I always say you can EFT, emotionally focused therapy. You can EFT anything. If somebody's like, I run into that stuff you're talking about all the time, where somebody will say, well, we'll just go out for we'll get a hot dog at the game, right? And then finally I'm in therapy, and he's saying like, okay, this might sound ridiculous, but I hate hot dogs. It's like, well, why are we eating hot dogs for the last 5 years of the game? I thought that was our thing. And he's like saying, man, I don't know, I had my dog Rex choked on a hot dog when I was a kid, and it's like it's PTSD every time I see a hot dog. And then but it's like, but I feel like if I told you that, you think I'm an idiot. I want the nachos. And she's sitting there saying, I hate hot dogs too. Like I why did we never talk about this? And it is because we're so worried that if we put ourselves out there with our partner, that they're going to, and I call it fixing or judgment statements. So they're gonna go into that. That's ridiculous. Why would you say that? And so we're trying to change that whole way they talk.
I had another experience like that. When I was in college, I went out with this girl, and we went to, I said, why don't we go? We'll get some pizza. We went to a pizza place, and she is like the slowest eater I've ever seen. And I'm sitting there saying, what's wrong with this girl? It's taking her 45 minutes to eat like 3 bites. I found out she was a natural hygienist, which was a very, very high level of vegetarian. They only ate fruits. They only ate nuts. And water and natural juices, and that's that. No animal product whatsoever. No eggs, no cheese, no nothing. And she laid it out. She said, if I would have told you that's how I lived my life, you'd think I'm crazy, Right. And she wanted to go out.
Right? Yeah. Would you have thought she was crazy, Michael?
No. I would have thought that's interesting. But for some reason, my sex drive and the way she looked would have override that problem right away. I don't really care what you would eat.
Okay. And I apologize. I know you were talking about we're talking about addiction, and here I'm taking, but I really feel at its core is getting guys to be feeling more authentic, connected in their marriages and their careers and their, in their health. I mean, because again, addiction is where the brain goes when it feels like it doesn't want to be uncomfortable. It doesn't want to, and it just turns to that because it wants that immediate rush of dopamine, that chemical rush. And then over time, it really, it becomes the go-to. So the second a guy feels disconnected or whatever it is in his life, the brain goes, hey, we're over here. Let's go do this.
Before we get a little bit more succinct into the sexual addiction part of it, there must be a point in a marriage where someone can become cognizant of the fact that their marriage is troubled, not toxic yet, but troubled. Mm-hmm. And there must be some warning signs. So what are they? Some of them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a big one that I'm seeing now, and literally this week I've been thinking about this a lot. I know it's only Tuesday, but it really is when people are together and they're going to watch a show together, but she's on her phone or he's whatever. So they think that they're being together, but they're really not having a shared experience. And so I think that's a big one where it's like we're going through the motions, but we're not really connected. And I think a lot of times that goes back to that and those levels of intimacy, the verbal intimacy. I mean, do you feel like you can just talk to your partner about anything? Do you feel like you're still naturally curious? My wife and I, thinking about the politics last week, we're complete, and we would sound like idiots if somebody listened in on us talking politics, but we're going to talk politics because we want to know what the other person thinks or feels. So I feel like when people just stop with even just that lowest level of verbal connection, that's when we know that there's some red flags. And I'll have people say like, I don't even know what to talk about. And it's because they've gotten in this pattern where they feel like everything they talk about has to be heavy. Is it about finances? Is it about the kids? Is it about, what do we got to fix in the house? Or just talk. And this is a big one. I've got a guy that I'm working with who, he loves to just sit down at night, one show on Netflix, whatever it is. He and his wife is there together. And he's noticing now that, again, she's got other things going on. She's doing other things. And he's like, did you see that? Or did you hear what he said? Or that's important. And she's like, hey, you can just fill me in later. And we identified that what he's looking for is that shared experience so they can talk about it later.
Sure.
So they have this thing to bond toward, right? And so I just feel like, and especially maybe in this day and age of so many distractions where people just start to, they find their thing that they do. They might be together, but they're doing their own thing.
Well,
and I just feel like that.
I went out to eat the other day, and at the table next to me, there's like three 22-year-olds, and the conversation is this.
It drives me crazy, Michael.
That's it. And obviously I'm not used to that. To me, in my era of time, social media was called outside. You got up and you went outside. I mean, it was a completely different thing. I feel terrible sometimes for these people because it's like, I don't know. I'm in my mind. Well, maybe they're texting each other at least. I don't know. I can't figure it out.
Right. You know what? Okay, can I exclusive on your show, right? This is something I've been kicking around for a while. I'm at dinner with 4 of my kids over the summer. We're down in Newport Beach, and they got their phones out or whatever. And I'm trying to say, hey, let's have this just be a phone-free dinner. And I love my kids. I got a great relationship with them. And one of my daughters has said, when you're saying that, what I'm hearing is you're not kind of saying, hey, what are you doing with your phone? Or, we grew up with our phones. Our phone is an appendage to us. And basically I hear you're an old man now saying, get off my lawn, right? You don't know that I'm like, sending my family is amazing, picture to my friends or isn't my dad crazy? And it's like, it was still hard for me to listen to. So where I kind of went with that was, I know back in the old days, 50s or 60s, and here's that darn rock and roll music, right? And the parents at that time were like, "This is a fad." I just want to tell the kids that that's not the music I listen to, and so then all of a sudden it's like that music stays, right? And then I remember when I was a kid, here comes computers, and my parents were like, man, a computer, give me a slide rule, or give me a calculator. Like, I don't need all that whatever. And they're like, it's a fad. It's going to pass, right? Well, now, obviously, computers are huge. And I feel like that's where we're at now with the cell phones, where my kids are saying, this is what I do. Like, this is who I am. This is part of me. And now I'm the guy saying, it's a fad. It's going to pass, right? As soon as they stop wanting to use their phone, it's like, no, that's their reality. That's their computer, their rock and roll music. So we sound like we're the old guys saying, in my day,
Well, that's true. I'm a musician. That's one of my things that I've done in the past. And there's the old adage is that good music was what you liked as a kid, and bad music is the stuff your kids like. And
that's funny. That's true. That's a true statement.
That is it's absolutely true kind of a statement. That's always the case. Sometimes I look back at the Beatles with their crazy haircuts, and I look at them and I go, what was going on? They look like priests to me. I mean, it's crazy. But
I do feel like with the phone in particular, I do feel like I've been very aware, especially the last couple of years of my practice. I work with a handful of teenagers. I'm mainly adults, but the teenagers immediately say, the parent will always tell me, and he's on his phone too much. And the teenager will always say, my parent doesn't even know what, when they tell me that, well, I don't have Facebook, I don't have Instagram. Basically what they're saying to me is, hey, I don't really care about you, It's kind of heavy. That is.
It is. I don't. I still have a hard time fathoming that that's the correct connection between. My phone is me.
I'm with you.
But I think maybe you could open up a whole new branch here of treating people who have issues with it, like separation anxiety, but with their phone, or depression because the girl only got 10 likes on her new dress, and now she's depressed.
It's so real. Yeah, so I feel like even if we embrace and say, okay, I'm going to sit there with empathy, and you betcha, son, I'm not going to tell you get off your phone or whatever. I'm going to try to have this communal experience with you. That is a completely separate thing. Then you're right about the person that is gets the dopamine rush with the and becomes addicted to constantly checking their phone. I still feel like you got to work that just like you're working sexual addiction or gambling addiction, or that it's recognizing there's a trigger, and usually that trigger is boredom, or and then there's a thought, I'm going to check my phone, and then here comes action. And so it's still about putting distance between that thought and action. So I still think that they can become, they can intentionally avoid continually following that trigger thought action pattern and avoid digging those neural pathways deep in their brain to where they feel like that's what they just have to do every few seconds.
Yeah, it's nuts. I can imagine, two young millennials having sex with each other, and all of a sudden someone gets a text message. They go, wait a second. And they go out and take care of the text message, and then you go, oh, yeah, that was my Uncle Bob. And sure, this is all really deflating, if you know what I mean, for the guy. And
that's funny. Okay, and I know I've been listening to your show. I love it. And I know you had my buddy Craig Parra on a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if he went through this on the show, but the biggest, the teen pregnancy is down, right? We're excited about that. But part of that is because teenage boys have turned to porn, right? And if we look at the largest group of people with erectile dysfunction right now is 18 to 25-year-old men. And that's because they have been raised with this heavy diet of porn. So, I feel like that is probably the case, and I've worked with addicts who, they basically want their phone in the background so they can watch something other than being present with their partner. And that's the stuff that is, that is damaging.
Yeah,
it really is.
I'd asked Craig about this now, and he told me about a term. I wrote it down somewhere. I don't know if I could find it, but all I can say is maybe dildo technology, dildo tectonics, or something like that. And the subject came up because I said, well, look, if I'm on my computer and I got this device that attaches to me, and there's some woman in Paris, France, who has a similar device for herself, and we're doing this online, I said, is that cheating on your wife? I'm not there.
I don't know either. To me, that's where, you are not, you are going away from that connection with your wife. And honestly, I feel like, and anyone, this is one of those things where back in the day, I felt like I really had to defend this, but I worked with 1,000+ guys. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm an evidence-based guy. And it's I feel like most guys don't even have a view of what that real connected relationship looks like. So, to that person that has no idea, no model of what a real connected relationship can look like, they can in that moment say, yeah, that's not cheating, right? But to me, it's still you have an opportunity to connect on all these different levels of intimacy with your partner and have this connection with them where that is your person. And you find an incredible amount of joy in being present with them. So anytime you're having this sexual experience without them, I feel like you're missing an opportunity to really continually bond and connect with them.
I kind of got I used to watch porn every now and then, but recently it's, gosh, I sound like such an old fart. But even when I'm talking about pornography, but it's the porn from the 70s I could tolerate. and the porn from maybe the 80s I could tolerate, but now it just seems to be so stark, so dehumanizing in both ways for the men and women. And I think a lot of the millennial guys think, gee, I'm so inadequate, I don't have a 10-inch penis, and some of the women want that, and they feel they got to go all night and this and that, and it's ugly. It's not,
and that's not what it's about. It's not what's up. Have you heard of the do you know about the Coolidge effect? I mean, have you heard of this?
I've heard the story, but go ahead. Yes, it's a good
Well,
story.
the story is good, right? Because of what is it? President Coolidge and his wife are touring. I think it's a poultry farm, and is it that she goes through first? And
yeah, she goes through first.
Yeah, right. Okay, you go. You know, right? And the guy says that's the rooster, and he mates with like a bunch of different women. No, now I'm forgetting the story. I was going to talk about the phenomenon, but what is the story? The
story is that Mrs. Coolidge goes in there and she notices that there is a rooster who's servicing all of the hens, going all day long, and everything is, he just has the stamina of a rooster. He's like he has that kind of stamina. And later on, when Coolidge is brought in, I think maybe his wife is there or not, I don't remember, but his wife was probably there, and she says, I was there, and he had the stamina of he could go all night long. And he said, with the same chicken?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Ba-doom, boom. Right?
Ba-doom.
But then where that goes, though, is kind of like what you were saying. That where we go to our Neanderthal brain, our lower brain, our reactionary brain, and it was designed to just flood the brain with dopamine to see that, one woman that we would then need to impress so that we could woo her, so that she would be the person who we would have our babies with, and then we're done. And now it's like the brain, that lower part of the brain sees porn, and every one of those women it sees, it's like, oh, there's a new one. I got to get her. That, so it's pouring out more dopamine and more dopamine and more dopamine. And pretty soon you're burning out your dopamine receptors. So it's causing you to need more and more and more. And I was like, why am I saying this, Michael? But it's like that whole thing about the porn of old versus the porn of new. So now people are just, they need more and more and more to get stimulated. And so that's why then people find that they have to amp it up. And sometimes it's the sick and disgusting and gross and whatever that is, because their brain's like, I need more, And so that's kind of where that goes. Why I think why a lot of people say that the porn of old was tame.
I interviewed somebody. It was a sad story. This guy was a rabbi out in California, had no concept of computers or anything. He had no idea. Mm-hmm. And one day, one of the people who was working with him said, "Hey, Rabbi, you got to get with it. I mean, everything's on the computer now. The whole system for the temple is here." And gave him a computer. And as he was going through the computer and looking at it, he found pornography. And then the pornography went to more pornography, went to homosexual pornography, and eventually wound up with child pornography. And he kept on getting, way back when, I don't know if you remember, if you could get like pop-up after pop-up, he's looking at David and not realizing he's going to the David, which is some homosexual. And now these things are popping up. And finally he calls the guy who gave him the computer and he says, "I can't use this. It's like I keep on getting these messages and things." And the guy says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." And the guy takes the computer, he finds this along with child pornography, and the next day the FBI's in his office. They take everything away, and he is now no longer a rabbi, has no place to go or to talk to, and he feels rather innocent about it. I don't know how much I believe him, but
right.
I have no reason why I shouldn't.
Yeah, and I've worked with enough. When you work with enough cases, I have run into those where I really do feel like it was someone that was. That was clearly not their intention, and all of a sudden they're somewhere they didn't know that they would be, and they've worked with a couple of people where there has been a sting. That's one of those, horror stories, cautionary tales.
Yeah. Well, I've had some. There was a real one which was really terrible. I had someone on who was trying to change state law in terms of arresting people for child pornography. Her son was autistic and had some slight mental retardation, and he was on this website called Limelight, which doesn't exist anymore, I don't think, but it was one of these peer-to-peer networks where you could just download music. He downloaded 1,000 files. Inside of those 1,000 files, there may have been 10 child pornography files. And I don't know if they were planted or whatever, but the police came knocking at the door, and this kid wound up in jail. And she was trying to change state law to be less, I guess, it's like a zero tolerance, less zero tolerance, and maybe understanding from time to time a particular predicament. And
Gotcha. Yeah.
and people at the radio
Well,
station hated me because I became the guy who loves child pornographers.
oh,
I did
okay.
that. I
Yeah,
did that
it's fun that
interview.
way.
Well, what can you do? That's why I'm not there anymore.
Well, that's the,
So,
oh, right. Okay. And so that's the part for me, as a therapist, obviously, I mean, well, no, not obviously. The hard part for me is, we don't know what everyone's experience is. Just like that guy with, if he's got autism, we don't know whether it's nature, nurture, whether there's like, a lower IQ, whether somebody themselves were molested, or whether it's physical abuse, sexual, whatever that was, that kind of then has led them down that path they're in. That is the hard part for me, is that I get that. And I feel like that's the person then telling themselves the I'm broken story, or I'll never get over this story, which then, which causes them more isolation, which causes them more feelings of being uncomfortable, which keeps this cycle going where they turn to porn again. So I feel like at some point, you do need someone to kind of let you know that there is hope. And in my certified mindful habit coaching, I mean, actually, I got that through Craig. And because, I'm part of that movement that is, let's look at this as more of a strength base. Let's drive, instead of just like, there's a theory that, when you remove an addiction, it leaves this big void. And now we're just kind of saying, all right, now just kind of live with that void. So what we really need to be doing is pushing a lot of good into that person's life so that it's filling that void, instead of just saying, all right, here's your void, now hang in there, Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that's that part where addiction comes in, and where somebody feels, again, they continually feel less than, and they don't know how to fill that void. And so the addiction is just waiting for them, just saying, I'm over here, I'll take care of that void.
I was happy to hear that basically you weren't treating sexual addiction, at least you and Craig are not treating sexual addiction like 12-step programs, because they're so poor. I mean, I come from a medical background. I'm a dentist. And and if I had a 5% success rate, I'd be out of business. You can't have that.
Yeah, and I have a lot of people that still will go to the group. And if you go to a group and it provides a nice support, and you've got guys that you can really bond with because you feel like you're alone in the struggle, I'm going to meet the client where they're at. But yeah, there's a lot of, okay, then when you relapse, then here comes shame. And at the core of pornography addiction in particular is this guilt and shame. And they're, again, evidence-based guy, absolutely nothing productive about shame. Guilt can say, man, I shouldn't do that again. But shame comes in and says, and by the way, you're a horrible individual. You'll never get over this. If people really knew what you were doing, they would run away from you, and they would, lock the doors. And that shame is what then people get fused to. And then when they believe that just causes more isolation, which leads to the addiction. So we got to break that at some point.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. It's interesting to me, though, that Craig had mentioned that he only treats men, and you're saying you pretty much only treat men. What's the difference between...
I do both. I do both.
Yeah. You do both. Then could you tell what's like the basic? Is there a core difference between a female who's a sexual addict and a guy who's a sexual addict?
That's a good question. I mean, and I'm not here. I've been preaching. I'm an evidence-based guy this entire time, but I feel like this is more of a theory, an anecdotal theory that I've gained over the years. Where I do feel like with guys, a lot of times there is this kind of a physiological need. I've got a urologist client that I've worked with forever, and he loved to talk about almost this concept of the male period, and where, if a guy has gone without release or orgasm for a while, that there is this buildup of other chemicals in the body, where then he almost feels like he's going crazy if he doesn't get a release. I feel like so with guys, and they become kind of, well, can I take one quick step back? It's the whole concept of back when we were younger. The concept of someone being, sexualized meant that they had been, we kind of assumed they've been molested was the thought. We now know that early exposure to pornography has that same effect of sexualizing someone. And what we mean by that is if someone's had early exposure to pornography, or if they've been molested, that sort of thing, now that, let's say they're in 2nd or 3rd grade and their teacher's in front of them, if they've been sexualized, now Mrs. Johnson she has boobs, and he's looking down her cleavage, and she has a figure. But if someone's never been sexualized, that's just Mrs. Johnson, Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I feel like that's a good way that then the wiring is kind of set from the time, from the beginning. So with a lot of my male addicts, they've been early exposure to pornography, dad's Playboys, or nowadays it's internet porn, whatever it is. And now there's this physiological, urge or need, and now they've got the pornography, and so they're locked in. I feel like with most of the women that I work with, it's more of like an emotional, it's an emotional release. I have women that are more addicted to, the story, a romance. They're watching more, I don't know, porn for the story. I know that's just, kind of a cliche, but it's like they really are kind of more addicted to the connection. And then it's almost like, and then they still, will finish with an orgasm or masturbation. But I feel like with a guy, it's just like, let's just do this, physiological release, perfect woman, perfect body, whatever I'm into, little waist, big chest, whatever, tattoos, whatever. And with the woman, a lot of times it's like, oh, he's so nice to her, And so I find that's kind of what I tend to see.
I thought that maybe that a lot of the men, when they get into this, because it's really pornography based, that there's just a lot of objectification of women, and
100%.
They look just they're a piece of whatever to use and whatever, and that's that. Whereas I think sometimes women may get involved with stuff like this that becomes an issue, maybe because they're trying to take control, or because you can control a lot of men with sex, and that maybe then they get that rush, but it's from a different kind of a place. So I was just curious about it. So you do treat women. It's very difficult for me to find a female sex addict that'll come on the show for some reason. They don't want to come on and talk too much.
Okay, and there's somebody that I've had, that I've had on my podcast that is, I'll talk to you off the air, but I mean, it's pretty fascinating. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I want you to move a little bit to one of the sides. Your face is half off of the video. Oh, there you are. Yeah, now you're centered. All right, cool.
There we go.
I didn't want to get that half thing going on there. Yeah. We've been talking a lot about the stuff you do and all of that, and I always like to try to get a little bit of a feel for the person I'm interviewing. And so my feeling is you probably weren't in third grade going, I'm going to be a marriage counselor when I get older. I think that's exactly what I want to do. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how come you're doing what you're doing.
No, that's nice. So I've actually spent a decade in computer software. I went through the .com boom. I thought I was going to be rich, I watched people around me that were buying stock for 10 cents at a company and watching it go up to $150 a share. I swung and missed on all of those. And so I did feel like a calling, so to speak, about, 8 or 9 years in, that I really did feel like this is my passion. And I always say that the software industry, I made some money, I traveled the world, but I always just felt like I was selling widgets. I didn't feel like it was a big passion. And I felt like when I spoke at trade shows all over the world, and I just felt like I really enjoyed talking with people. I was in sales and marketing, and I felt like I really just enjoyed learning more about people. So then my software company I worked with tanked. I started a computer hardware company working in the digital forensics market, and but at that time I felt like this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. So at that point I did say, all right, a couple of years are going to go by. I'm either going to get my master's in counseling or I'm not. So I decided to just go forward with that. And then once I actually went back to school, I think I was in my early 30s, I never knew that you could go to school and actually enjoy the reading or the classes or that sort of thing. But it was because I actually found stuff that I liked, and that was the world of therapy. I still got out and did it part-time. I still had my computer duplicator company. I own part of a shaving cream company, part of a nuts and bolts company. So I still had this like entrepreneurial itch. But man, the more I got into the counseling, the more I just felt like this is right. And so fast forward a few years, and I created an online program called The Path Back, which is an online pornography addiction recovery program. And then with that, and then I started a podcast called The Virtual Couch. And I feel like as those got out there, my practice is it just kind of really grew, and it grew fast. And so I got rid of all the other ventures, and now this is what I do, and I love it. I really do. I mean, it's a passion.
It's funny. You got to do what you love, or it takes its toll at some point in time.
Well, I think that when I'm talking with guys about being connected to partners, I've been married for 29 years. I feel like we're very fortunate in my relationship. I call it the crapshoot theory. She had no idea that we would. I didn't know, that she would be the person she was when we got married. When I was 20, she was 19. And man, we lucked out. We have a lot of similar interests and that sort of thing. But there's that part of me that felt like, man, I wish I could help people have this kind of a relationship. And so, but I feel good in my relationship, and I feel like that entrepreneurial experience. A lot of people, when they come into counseling, especially guys, kind of feel like, oh, it's gonna be the guy with the patches on his elbows and I don't know, like a pipe or something. He's just gonna say, tell me how you feel. And I feel like, no, I've been out there 10 years in the corporate world, and I've started my own businesses, and I've failed, I've lost money, I've made money. So it's like I feel like I can have empathy for that. And so when I'm talking to a guy that feels like he's not connected to his career, then I feel like I can jump in there too and just say, all right, then let's do something about it. You know?
Sure. It's a hard move. It's a hard move. I got to tell you, I'm in semi-retirement now, and that's unique too, because I've never had like the opportunity to vegetate and sit and do nothing. And
can I tell you too that this is a big part of my story. So, gosh, it's probably been 20 years ago. I just started running, because I had put on some weight when I got out of college, and I started with my 5Ks, and I moved up to a 10K and then a half marathon, and I ran my first marathon. And it was when I crossed the finish line, I cried. I felt like, oh my gosh, I found another thing I was passionate about. Then I chased down a Boston qualifying time. I ran the Boston Marathon. Then all of a sudden, I volunteered at a 100-mile race in the area. It's the Super Bowl of hundreds. It's called the Western States 100. And then all of a sudden, I thought, man, who is it that's running these 100-mile races? And so then I started saying, all right, let's try this. So I started running 50Ks, and I started running 50 milers, and I started running 100Ks. And then I ran my first 100-mile race, and I've never been more hooked or addicted to something in my life. And now fast forward a couple of hundred races later, and I've done some local fundraising where I run 24 hours around the track for the schools in my area to raise money. And I did that for 7 years. But my point bringing that up is that I never realized while that was going on. I mean, I come from a family where a lot of people struggle with alcohol addiction. There's a lot of addiction tendencies in my family. And little did I kind of realize that, oh my gosh, I found my socially acceptable, healthy addiction. And I found that over these 20 years that, if I didn't run I ran 6 days a week. If I missed it 2 days, I found that I was shorter, fatter, bolder. I was worse husband, father, And so I would say when I would go speak at these events, when people would say, why do you run 100 miles? I would say, oh, because I can, or I want to eat ice cream. But at my core, I realized, man, this is feeding my addictive nature, my addictive tendencies.
Yeah.
And so there's some belief now. Well, and I would say there's some belief now that we're all addicts of sorts. And so it's like, how do we find our socially acceptable, healthy addiction?
I like that term, and socially acceptable, healthy addiction. That's then
you get to eat ice cream and it's nice.
Yeah. And so in my life, I've had like 3 careers. So
okay.
And it's kind
dentist?
Dentist is the last one. The one before that is I taught neurologically impaired and emotionally disturbed children for the New York City Board of Education for 6 years.
Oh wow!
So my master's degree is in education, and I was a professional freelance musician before that. My undergraduate degree is in music. I actually worked as a sideman with some bands you may have heard of from way back when, like the Four Tops and the Spinners and stuff like that. And out of the 3 jobs, the most rewarding was teaching the kids.
Was it really? Okay.
Yeah.
What would you like about that?
I knew for a fact that I was taking human beings and molding them into something better than they would leave me better than when they came in. Mm. Or I throw them out of the class. So this way I had a sterling record all the time, one or the other. But, which
I love that because I do feel like, if you have a group of, let's say 15, I was 15 of these kids with me. There was no other help in the room, and you have 2 or 3 that just disrupt everything. You're thrilled to get them the hell out of the classroom. Got to suspend them for a week. Let them smash each other in the head. I wouldn't stop them because I knew they'd just be out of there, and I'd be able to actually run the classes. But I like what you said though about. I feel like when I made the pivot from software to therapist. It really was, and I know it sounds cliche, but it feels rewarding to be able to help people. And I didn't realize how much that was one of my core values, was to be able to do that.
And now actually I'm thinking of becoming a 911 dispatcher. Because because I can't think of anything better that you can do than to help someone that's going through a horrific situation. I got to tell you, the state of Florida does not make that easy. It's 230 hours. You have to pass a test, and it's ridiculous. And having said that, this has nothing to do with it, but I saw a movie a week ago, which is probably the best movie I've seen this year. It's an indie film from Denmark. It's called The Guilty, and it's about
I've never heard of it.
I would imagine most people have never heard of it, and it's about a 911, and there like 211 is what they use in Denmark, but it's about a dispatcher and what goes on, and Unbelievable movie. Unbelievable.
Well, so I've heard, and it's funny when I deal with a lot of clients I've dealt with. I always call them these little side projects. It's really not the right thing in therapy, but you'll have to go on my train of thought real quick. I remember the first time I heard a guy in therapy say, and I realized I had forgotten to eat, and I thought, I'm sitting there trying to follow the story, and I'm thinking, I've never forgotten to eat in my entire life. And so then as I would notice, like every now and again, somebody would bring up that. And then I was lightheaded because I forgot to eat. And then I find out that I've got this little side theory where I feel like there's about 10% of the population that just, food is just fuel. They don't have that same relationship with food as the rest of us. And so they don't have that empathy for, people with food addiction or people that turn to food. Anyway, the reason I mentioned that is another one of these side projects I feel like is I've talked to a lot of people that have dealt with after people die, they deal with funeral directors. And when people are in emergency situations, they deal with the dispatcher then that keeps them on the phone. Is that what that is?
Yeah, it's someone that has some training, knows what to do.
Yeah, and those are those two things where I feel like I never realized what a role those people play. Funeral directors and kind of comforting someone, and then dispatchers and trying to keep someone calm and in the moment. And I've heard a number of stories about each one of those and what kind of role they play in helping kind of people make sense of really traumatic situations. So that's kind of funny you bring that up. Go do it. I want to have you on my podcast and talk about your life as a dispatcher. Yeah,
I'm telling you, it'll be a lot of work. They drug test you continually, which I don't care about, but it's still annoying. There's a privacy thing I don't like about it. But it is what it is. I want to go forward with it. That's what I'll wind up doing. Way easier to work for the post office. And there you can actually be crazy and still work for them. It doesn't make a difference. That's how it goes there. I'm curious, and maybe it's because I saw the Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie about Freddie Mercury. Do you ever get homosexual sex addicts in there in your practice?
Yeah, and you know what I've seen more of, which is really interesting, is and I am again, no guilt or shame. My job is to help the client with whatever they bring into the room. What I end up seeing a fair amount are people that might come in and they are in a marriage, but they are, when I'm doing an assessment, if they're a porn addict, for example, and they're kind of telling me that they only view, gay porn, because they'll tell me, and I still, a couple of people have said, it's because I, respect women too much, or, those kind of things, right? But it's like, as I kind of dig a little deeper, and here's somebody that doesn't feel satisfied in their marriage, and then the gay pornography, homosexual pornography is the outlet. And then it's like, when you dig a little deeper, here's somebody that has been repressing their sexuality for who knows how long, to the point of even where they get in what is called a mixed orientation marriage. Here's a homosexual man who has married a woman because they were so in that world of guilt and shame. And so now pornography is actually giving them this outlet where they feel like they can express their sexuality, even if it's only in their mind, but it kind of keeps them, I don't know, it just puts them in a pretty rough spot, because they're not engaged in their marriage. And now here they have this is my, I'm longing for, my call is homosexuality. And so I've worked with a number of people where then it's like, what do we do with that? Where people then say, I gotta be me, I got to be more authentic, and then you work with them, and that can be hard where they end the marriage. But I've also worked with people that we're working with the pornography addiction. It's around homosexual pornography, and they aren't willing or in a position to let their spouse know, or to end a marriage, because maybe they do have kids, or their family, there's a bunch of shame there. And so I see a fair amount of that. I do.
In your opinion,
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, yeah, it does. It does. In your opinion, I'm just curious, do you ever feel that in certain situations with certain couples that pornography is a good thing, that it's therapeutic?
I get that asked a lot, and honestly, this is that part where, and I know I keep saying this, I am a no guilt and shame guy, but I feel like if I've got a couple that's bringing that in, I'm gonna have some empathy around that. I'm gonna see what that. But I have seen that brought into counseling, into therapy many times, and I'm not an all or nothing or black or white kind of guy, but I feel like when we really explore what that's about, there's typically one of the partners has felt like, well, that's what we have to do in order for him to kind of feel connected. But I would rather us not have pornography and work on our connection. So I feel like, and I get that a lot, I do. And so I can understand that, but I feel like at the core that there's still a relationship issue there, and it can be worked with, but that's where we got to jump in with those EFT skills, where it's like, people need to be able to feel like they can be vulnerable. And if the guy is willing to say, man, you know what, I'm kind of addicted to this, and I have a hard time staying present if I'm not thinking about, the perfect body or whatever. And that takes a pretty patient partner to kind of say, hey, I appreciate you being that vulnerable, and I would rather us work on you and me, and we'll kind of work on being present. Let's try this without the pornography, and it might be a bumpy ride, but we'll get there. So I don't know if that feels like a cop out of an answer, but it's like,
No,
I feel
but
like it's still
I understand that because, be quite honest, I'm sure you've heard it. I have had different therapists for different reasons that say, oh, yeah, and porn is a good thing. And we show them the porn, and they get to learn what to do and da-da-da and all of this stuff. So, I mean.
Can I tell you, what's wild for me is, and I had this in a session today where you've got a couple in there, and it comes up where the woman brings up, hey, he keeps wanting to do something that I don't want to do or that's uncomfortable to me or whatever, and usually it's around. It's moves that they have seen in pornography, and the woman there seemed to like it, and so then it's like, sometimes I almost see the guy will look at me almost like, hey, don't out me, bro, don't you dare, and it's like, I know that he's talking about things that he has watched in porn over and over, and so he's convinced if she's not enjoying herself now, which you mentioned earlier, objectification, which is probably because she feels like, she's objectified. He's like saying, okay, then we just need to do this, but he's not about to say out loud because the girls in porn seem to dig this,
Yeah, that's I've tried that. It's a big mistake. I never assumed that. It just doesn't work that way. Women don't like being sprayed in the face too much, and
right. I mean,
and being violated by salamis. I mean, it's
well, and I should have said this earlier when you mentioned objectification. If I can just kind of go on another quick soapbox here, sure. I feel like, and this is a big thing that I feel passionate about this. I will get a guy that will say to me, he'll look over at me, and the wife's there, and he'll say, hey, look, I've let her know. I made this easy. I told her, if I'm happy, let's celebrate with sex. If I'm sad, nothing gets me out of that like sex. If I'm sick, nothing fights the common cold like an orgasm, if whatever it is. And he's like basically saying, I made it easy on her, and he looks at me like, back me up, Mr. Expert Therapist. And now I've done this so long that I look over at the wife and I'm like, okay, what are you feeling right now? And now she's in tears, and I'm in control of his happiness. So, he's basically saying if he's ever not happy, it's because I'm not having sex with him. And that leads to her feeling like an object, so then he'll start to pout, or he'll start to pull away, or all of those kind of things. And so when he starts to do that, he's basically created this situation where he will then distance himself or pout or not help as much because he feels like that's the way he's finally going to get sex. And it just creates this dysfunctional relationship with sex. Mm-hmm. So finally she feels like, fine, I guess I got to give in order for him to help, give the kids a bath or do the dishes or whatever. And so then she feels like it's not that intimate connection she wants. It's I guess I got to do my duty.
I once used sex, I think, inappropriately with my wife, and I was experiencing, and I understand it's pretty common when you get into your 60s, is sometimes you become aware of your heart. And mm-hmm. I felt like it was beating and fluttering and all of this stuff. So I went to my cardiologist, and he says, I want you to wear this Holter monitor. Now, a Holter monitor is a gizmo that's taped to your body. Now they have all sorts of stuff. This has happened like 10 years ago. But they have all sorts of stuff that's really easy to use. But this used to get taped to you, and it recorded your heart and what was going on 24 hours, and the next day you would go and have it removed, and they would analyze it. So that evening, I said to my wife, the doctor said we should have sex. And she goes, no, he didn't. I said, no, he said we should have sex so that it registers and they'll be able to check my heart out while that's going on. And she said, okay, and we did. And finally, like a day or two, I bring the thing in, and then a week later I have my exam, and he goes, everything in your heart looked pretty good, except, he says, there's one point where your heart really started to race, and it was jumping around, and it was very erratic. And I said, oh, yeah, that was probably when I was exercising. And he goes, at 12:30 in the morning? So I said, well, I was exercising with my wife. And he went, oh. and went on with it. But that's the only time I think I actually ever took advantage of a situation like that. I've been told no appropriately. So, like, my wife had 102 fever, and I felt, well, if she's hot, but she went, no, don't go there. That's the wrong thing to do. So,
my wife told me one time, it was funny when I had first kind of learned about that I don't know, that relationship with intimacy. I did go home to my wife and I just said, I don't do that, do I? You know, and she's like, yeah, you know, I know you when you're telling me I look really pretty or you're helping a little more with the kids or whatever. You know, she's like, I know that you're kind of you want to be intimate. And then she's like, but it's not like after we do, it's not like then you kick the dog or you ignore the kids or you know that sort of thing. But she's like, but then you're not as complimentary or you're not as. And so when I work with guys, I mean, I'm telling them. You know, if that's the person they are leading up to wanting to be intimate with their wife, then afterward narrate that. So I'll now say to my wife, it's like the day after, hey, you look beautiful, and I'm not even trying to have sex with you, right? Or it's like, look at me, I'm helping the kids, and I know that is not on the table tonight, you know. And she would say, okay, stop it, you know, I get it. But it was that point where it did make me realize that I kind of was, you know, being nicer and helping more when I kind of felt like, oh, you know. Maybe tonight's the night, right? And you got to change that relationship with intimacy in that way.
I try to be a stunning, wonderful example of a human being all the time with my wife.
That a guy.
You know, there you go. I compliment. You know, I really, truly believe that everyone in life has to know that they're loved. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And if you can't do that with your intimate partner, then you're lost with your intimate partner.
Well, so at the core of the EFT, the marriage therapy stuff, is it's based on attachment theory, and that's that concept where from early age we're trying to form these secure attachments. First, it's with our parents, and when no one does it perfectly, but then we get out into our you know, adolescence and teenage years, and we're basically going around trying to say, you know, who can I trust? You know, who can I be vulnerable with, and who can I attach to? But then, you know, you say something and the bullies on the playground tell you you're a wimp or whatever, or you lay your heart out to a girl in high school and then she breaks your heart. And so that's where we start to then we get a little more judicious, and are we willing to, you know, be vulnerable or however. So now we meet the person of our dreams, and this is the person we're supposed to attach to, but we've already got this build up. If I'm too vulnerable, you know, they'll run away. So, I mean, but at the core of EFT is this concept of, are you there for me? Do you love me? Can I count on you? Do you have my back? So, I mean, like, that's, you know, yeah.
My wife is very into coffee. I never drank coffee until I got married, and every morning we'll have coffee. And usually, since I've been working, I'm up before her. And although she can get it and do it all of this stuff by herself, whenever I pour myself coffee, I take a mug down for her, and I leave it by the coffee machine, because even if it doesn't cross her mind, maybe subliminally it will, but I want her to know that I thought about her that morning.
I love it.
You know. And so I've always been that way. The sex part, that's great. Now I get a little bit of what you mentioned though earlier. Like if I think if I'm ready and I'm not, or if I've been told yes and then it doesn't happen, I get pissed.
Yeah,
I get pissed. Yep. And the next day, that's all I'm thinking about for the majority of the day. And I just get pissed until I do have that release, and then I'm a more pleasant.
And so I work with guys on that. I mean, that's normal. And so I work with guys on, you know, bringing some awareness around what's that story my brain's telling me. It's that, you know, it's the she doesn't want me story, and our brain's trying to hook us on that, fuse to that thought, because then if we fuse to that thought, we don't have to do the hard work, which the hard work would be, you know, kind of being mindful, breathing through that, you know, not chasing those negative thoughts, and then being present with her regardless. Right?
That's exactly what I feel, and I know that it's not that she doesn't love me, but she said like last time I think it was, gee, I'm so tired. This is the third day in a row you're tired, you know. And I made some comment. I said, you know, like when you come home, if George Clooney was here, you wouldn't be so goddamn tired, you know.
Cool effect. That's right.
But you know, I'm not George Clooney, and I guess if Kim Basinger in her heyday walked in, I would kind of be excited too. But I did want to ask you something. I know we're running a little late. If you got to go, then tell me.
I got about 5 more minutes. I'm heading to my son's first basketball game of the season for high school. So,
awesome. That's great. You know, that's great. The other thing that I just noticed when I was reading your bio and all that is it said that you have some type of Christian basis or your faith. I wonder, how does that enter into it?
Yeah, okay, and bear with me, this might get a little bit sappy here, but so, you know, in the Christian faith, you know, we're big on Jesus, right? And there's a concept of this, there's a concept of the atonement, and the atonement was where Jesus went into the Garden of Gethsemane, and he kind of felt everyone, he atoned for everyone's sins. And so, you know, the concept there in Christianity is that he knows, you know, all of our fears, our insecurities, and he's kind of felt those, so he's there for you. So the concept with addiction in particular is that, you know, when people, addicts, and it's like what I was talking about earlier, when they keep trying and they fail or they relapse, and they're kind of locking into the story of that they're broken or they're not good enough. And so they eventually, it's almost like they want someone to tell them, or they want their brains to tell them that they are broken and that they can't do this and that they're not enough. And so, and as a therapist, I mean, not that I'm saying I am representing, Jesus or anything, but I feel like my job is to say, hey, I'm not going to guilt or shame you. Keep bringing back the data. Tell me where, tell me what the triggers were that led to the relapse. Let's keep working on this. And I feel like, in the Christian faith, what you're basically saying is, hey, you're not going to be perfect. You're going to relapse. You're going to have moments of weakness. And that's that concept in Christianity of where, hey, Jesus doesn't just make up the difference. He is the difference. And so if you feel like you are broken, that's where they go a lot with you can hand that part over to Christ. He's already taken care of this for you. And for a lot of folks, that gives them hope because they feel like they're alone in this journey of addiction. Mm-hmm. And that is the part where they're going 12-step model. They're talking about a higher power. And, so I do feel like in the Christian faith, I'm not going down the Old Testament God of heck, fire, and damnation. I'm in that New Testament, charity suffereth long, patience, unconditional love, that kind of thing. Because I think at the core of every addict is that story of I'm unlovable, I'm broken, I'm not fixable. Because if I fuse to that thought, that cognitive fusion, then I don't have to do that hard work of recovery.
Judaism in the Old Testament is a lot more stark, if you will. In Judaism, they say you should get divorced if you don't get together. If you can't get together, there's no sense to you being that way. And the right thing to do is divorce. And there's all sorts of procedures and stuff like that. So it's not looked upon as being terrible. Going ahead and having sex, you could have sex. Adultery means with married people. Mm. So you could have concubines and other people as long as you weren't married to them.
Okay.
Okay. So another thing was that you could certainly go out of your faith. I mean, the Old Testament accepted. Let's say Moses' wife was not Jewish. She was a Midian princess. So they don't. There are certain things they don't care about. But the reason I say it's stark is because Judaism very heavily believes, and this is through Old Testament, that God is there, but He will not help you. He's given you the tool. He's given you the tools to manage your life. And there's only one person who's responsible for anything and everything, and that's you. And you tip your balances one way or another, and that's the person you become. And there are some other phrases like you will never be given more than you can handle.
Yeah, right.
But it's just a slightly, I want to see the show on comparative sexuality with different religions.
No, I like that. I mean, I'd never really heard it put that way, and that makes sense, where then it's like, then here comes the New Testament version, right? Where then it's like, okay, it's on you, but if you can't do it, right, then here's this savior, I guess, basically, that's like they're going to make up the difference.
Yeah, Judaism would say, but here, this is something that will help you. This is, just read these prayers, and don't look at them as a prayer, because all the translations are... I can give you all the Jewish translations. They are God is good, God is great, we love God, God is good, God is good. And it's not about that. It's about what's going through your mind and using these as meditative tools.
Yeah.
So it's different. So look, I know you got to go. Before you go, though, tell everybody where they can get in touch with you, about your website, your podcasts, all that stuff.
Yeah, so you can find me at TonyOverbay.com, and then my online pornography addiction recovery program, which is linked off of TonyOverbay.com. It's called The Path Back, and you can also find that at PathBackRecovery.com. And my podcast is called The Virtual Couch, and I'm about 88 episodes in, and I just absolutely love it. It is I don't know, it's done better than I ever even imagined. I have serious imposter syndrome with the guests and the feedback, and that's that part where I feel passionate about that podcast. And I cover topics about pornography addiction. I do a lot with parenting. I do a lot with couples communication, acceptance and commitment therapy. I mean, I try to cover all kinds of topics, basically like free therapy is what it is.
Awesome. I can probably use some, so maybe I'll join you one night. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening.
It's a blast.
I had a lot of fun, and I got to tell you that this show is 180 degrees completely and totally different than the one I did with Craig. Which is absolutely totally different kind of a thing. So I want to thank you again for joining us. I'll send you a copy if you'd like once I clean it up.
And I'd love to run it. Okay, and I would love to run it on maybe as a bonus episode on my podcast. I think that would be great. I'd love for my listeners.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I really do appreciate it.
Hey, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care now.
Bye-bye.
So, folks, again, that was Tony Overbay. And I just want to read a little bit about him again here so that, let me see on the bottom here, maybe it has the info. One more time. Maybe not. Anyway, Pathback was one of the websites he does. And again, it's Overbay, just like it sounds, Overbay. Go ahead and join him. I'm sure you'll enjoy it, and you'll have a lot of fun listening to the show. If today's interview is anything like what usually goes on with it, I'm sure you will have a very, very good time with it. So anyway, I do want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. And I want everyone to realize a certain thing. First is that I usually do the homework first, but we broadcast every Tuesday evening from 8 p.m. Eastern time till whenever I get done. It's usually at least a half an hour show. Sometimes it's a little bit more than that, sometimes a little bit less than that. But basically, I feel that everything in life is possible, but fewer things are probable. But there is one thing that is certain, and that's that you're alive. So go ahead out and enjoy life, because tomorrow really is but it seems not to be happening. Let me see if I can figure it out. No. Something else here. Just bear with me. I know this is kind of just because it's kind of odd. So let's that. This is what I want. It's an old song. Sorry, you have to listen to it now.